Hello everyone! This is Ian Schaefer here with UDA Technologies, and we are just about to dive into our 3 scoops of QuickBooks. Of course, I've got my team with me today. I have Ben Willis, he's our senior QuickBooks developer. Of course, I'm the senior QuickBooks Pro advisor here at UDA Technologies, and I also have Holly, who was kind enough to set this all up with us. She's our head of sales. So Holly, tell me a little bit about the interest and the reason why we're doing this webinar today, if you would.
Oh yeah, great question, and so much fun. I mean, we've had a tremendous amount of interest in this type of webinar for a while. Everyone is always so curious to know really what is the best way that I can use not only ConstructionSuite or ConstructionOnline, but really how can I make that work with my accounting program. We all know that QuickBooks is the most widely used accounting program for construction professionals, and luckily for you guys at UDA, we've been doing this for about 2 decades, so we've really got the kind of industry standard as far as QuickBooks integration goes. So when we kind of look at setting up this session today, what we want to do is give you guys really a big picture view of what all of your options are for integrating with QuickBooks. We have some fantastic integration that I know many of you have been using for years, but we've been able to introduce some new options for you this year as well. So we'll have some fun going over those.
Yeah, and as we do so, Holly, of course, is going to be fielding most of our questions today. So if you guys do have questions, take a look at that GoToWebinar panel. There should be an area on there marked questions. If you guys have any as we're going through the webinar, chat them in. Holly will answer as best she can as we're going. She'll also flag a lot of those for me so that we can cover those, or Ben for that matter, so we can cover answers to those questions or the questions themselves as we're going through the webinar itself. So at this point, Holly, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and let you take off to go get your typing hands ready there?
I definitely will. I'll be standing by, everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful. So again, we're going to be working with that. And with that, we'll go ahead and start diving into all these different topics. So again, today, as we're going through this, we're going to be taking a look at our 3 major platforms. Now, the ones that we're going to start with today is going to be ConstructionSuite and QuickBooks Desktop. Of course, as Holly mentioned, this has been an application that we've had in place now for, ConstructionSuite has been around for about a decade now, I think. And QuickBooks, we've actually been integrating with QuickBooks Desktop since a long time ago. It's been a while. We've been a QuickBooks Gold certified developer now for well over a decade, almost 2 decades at this point. And as you do work with some of the leaders in the QuickBooks Pro Advisor fields or the accounting fields, the vast majority of them have been recommending this style of integration or this style of setup in QuickBooks for decades, the stuff that we're looking at right now. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, we'll take you through that first. But just to give you an idea real quick before we dive into it, again, I mentioned Ben Willis is here with me today. He's one of our chief developers here, worked with the QuickBooks Desktop application. So, Ben, how much have you enjoyed working with QuickBooks Desktop in the cleanup for the development process so far?
Yeah, working with QuickBooks Desktop has actually been pretty phenomenal. It's great just to see how much power that application really has, and how much we've been able to leverage that by the integration that we've been taking advantage of and the things that we've been able to add over time.
Yeah, that's a good point, and we've also taken advantage of a lot of the flexibility as we're going through this. I know that I've worked with probably thousands of you guys who are joining us today. Again, I've been with the company myself for about 10 years, and I've had the opportunity to see some of the major enhancements. Even recently, some of the things that Ben has been able to provide for us, like the new assembly-based integration tools and some of the enhancements that we've got to things like the application for payment that are available in there. We've really seen it kind of expand into some of the strength and some of the reasons that QuickBooks has been probably the #1 accounting system in the world for a long time. Now, just a quick recap, too, on some of the things that we typically talk about. I've actually got one of the estimates available for us here in ConstructionSuite so that we can take a look at some of the QuickBooks settings. But our first scoop today, we'll talk about the ConstructionSuite application and how it's available to integrate with QuickBooks, and hopefully how some of you guys have been able to set this program up to take advantage of all these additional features. So again, in ConstructionSuite, which has been out since about 2006 now, most of the integration for QuickBooks takes place within estimates on any given job. So if you guys actually go take a look at the projects themselves, you'll find a full list of projects available to integrate. Each project is going to have a client. This is an exact match for the QuickBooks customer job. So whenever you guys are doing the integration itself, you'll find we have a client, we have a project, QuickBooks has a customer, they have a job, and that makes the connection for us to be able to push forward and communicate directly back and forth between these two programs. Within the estimates for these jobs, you'll find that we've structured most of our information to be categorized with subcategories and line items available within every single one of these estimates. I'm going to simplify this a little bit so we can see what kind of information would be going back and forth. So again, here we've got one of the estimates in ConstructionSuite, and we've set it up so that we're working with categories, subcategories, and line items. This, of course, is going to transfer over to QuickBooks as a collection of line items that we're going to be working with throughout this integration process. Now, of course, again, different companies are going to have different needs. Different companies might have different estimating templates, different structures, different accounts. Everybody's a little bit different and a little bit special. So as we've been working through the QuickBooks integration options and the QuickBooks integration features and functions, you'll find under the QuickBooks integration tab a number of different possibilities for the information that you guys are working with. Now, of course, today as we're going through this, I'm going to use my preferred structure and my preferred settings. Of course, as Ben can probably tell you, this is just scratching the iceberg of all possibilities. But we don't necessarily want to get into all of them, so we will go over my preferred methods today, and to some degree his as well. I hope they better be. And as we're going through those two, if they fit for you guys, great. If they don't fit, definitely check with your accountant. If you think they're pretty close, give me a call. We can always talk about specifics as well as they come up. Now, of course, the first place to take a look in ConstructionSuite is when you get one of these estimates open, go to the QuickBooks Integration tab and click QuickBooks Initial Setup. This setup session that we're putting in right now is going to be pretty similar between all the different versions and the different products that we're working with. So this collection of settings that I'm recommending now will be the same that we work with through Socket, which is the ConstructionOnline connection to QuickBooks, and through ConstructionOnline to QuickBooks Online as well. The settings and the selections will be pretty similar, I believe, and you should be able to go through and take a look. Ben, are there any major differences between all the different settings and the different possibilities here that you're aware of?
No, there's no major one that stands out other than with ConstructionOnline, you just don't have that last level of detail, and so you will just be working with your categories and subcategories. So it simplifies that for you so you don't have to worry about that as much.
Oh, that's a good point. Conveniently, in this case, that actually fits in perfectly with my recommendations anyway.
There we go.
Yeah, because as we push forward in this integration option, ConstructionSuite has categories available, subcategories, and individual line items. The line items in the estimates in ConstructionSuite are typically things like the 2x4s, the individual windows. I mean, if we're doing siding, maybe it's the Tyvek sheeting. We'll have nails, we'll have paint, we'll have all these different things. They tend to be very, very specific, and sometimes they can be pretty small pieces that we're estimating in here. As some of the major construction accountants will tell you, though, you'll end up spending way more time trying to track the pennies that you spend on a box of nails, and it becomes much, much more valuable to summarize that information so that you can focus more on figuring out the top-level expenditures or your top-level job costing, and only worry about how much you spent on a box of nails if it becomes too expensive. So as we go through and we take a look at all these different options, my first recommendation is for probably about 80% of our companies now. My first recommendation is to use the cost of goods sold setting here in the initial setup wizard. Cost of goods sold tends to cover the cost of the project, and this is going to be most beneficial for the companies who go out and they buy the materials that they're using on the job, they use them on the job, and then the customer will pay them back for everything that they used. This, again, it fits probably about 80% of our clients. There are some special cases, of course, and for that we've got available the construction work in progress as well. The work in progress is a different style of accounting typically used by larger projects or companies that work on larger construction projects or longer projects. If it ever overlaps years and you guys have special tax considerations, work in progress is probably the better accounting method for you. Again, your accountant will know exactly what you guys need, so pick whichever one of them they recommend. If you guys want to go with a completely custom solution, we've got a lot of companies that do this too. Use the custom option, and then you can pick and choose everything from there. So we're going with cost of goods sold. We'll click Next. From here, we're going to be taking a look at the chart of accounts. Now, ConstructionSuite and ConstructionOnline, they each share the flexibility here of being able to choose whatever default accounts you want to use, in this case based on the ConstructionSuite estimates. But this isn't going to require that you use the UDA chart of accounts. You'll always be able to go into QuickBooks and map them over to your existing accounts after we send over those items. And it just gives you the ability to preload if you don't already have something. So again, we'll set some defaults in this case. And again, if memory serves, we'll be taking a look at these here shortly. But these options for the accounts will be available through all the different integration options that we talk about today as well. So again, we'll choose a default. In my case, I recommend everybody use a single account. And so by selecting the parent account here, you'll be able to name that single account. Now this is for all costs on the job, which is why the default account name tends to be UDA costs. You could always change this to something like should be 0 or red flag, or anything for that matter. The purpose of this account is to just give ConstructionSuite the one standard go-to for any of this process, just to make sure that we have a baseline, we have a starting point. From there, you can actually expand the chart of accounts if you'd like. You can create an account for every category and subcategory, or again later, once the items get over to QuickBooks, you can even redirect those items to point to your existing COGS accounts. Now, some of the partner organizations that we've worked with in the past, like NAHB or NARI, Remodeler's Advantage, or even groups like Intuitive Accountant, or some of my favorite kind of more popular QuickBooks Pro advisors like Judith Miller, who has a team of probably 5,000 clients. We all tend to recommend the same sort of things, and you'll typically see for most construction companies some kind of like a direct material cost and a labor cost, direct labor costs. You'll see subcontractor expenses, equipment rental fees, and things like that. All of these would be things that we would set up in QuickBooks to tie into these items. But we offer this class tracking option to help you guys make sure that you can flag those for the right kind of accounts that you guys are working with as you go. So again, some of these options take advantage of the QuickBooks features that you guys have available in whichever version of QuickBooks that you guys are using, as long as it's made available within the last decade or so. And of course, you'll have the ability to choose your account type here as well. Most of you guys will be picking, again, cost of goods sold. Some of you might pick expenses, although it's a little bit more rare. If you're doing work in progress, then everything is probably going to be an asset until it's actually used on a job, and then it becomes a liability until it's sold. So again, a couple of different possibilities here as you guys are working. You can choose whatever fits your company. On the next page, we're taking a look at the items list itself. Now this is where the real detail starts to get fun. Now, as Ben mentioned earlier, on this page, we're going to be choosing categories and subcategories. This is going to be the default option for the additional 2 scoops that we'll be looking at here in a few minutes. But from this page, I highly recommend most of you guys use the category subcategory option for our level of detail. The parent item is a decent way to go ahead and separate out all of the UDA items that we're sending over. For ConstructionSuite, I did not use a parent item. Through Socket, I believe I did use a parent item. I think I called it ConstructionOnline items. So we'll be able to take a look at that one here in just a moment. And of course, for the item type, I chose, it should actually be non-inventory parts, I believe. Let's switch that over. With the differences between these different item types, of course, for you QuickBooks users, the different item types are going to be service items if you guys want to use them on paychecks, non-inventory parts if you're going to use them all over the place, inventory parts if you guys keep track of those. Those are the top 3. I only ever recommend service items or non-inventory parts, though, because they're the most common. Of course, as you're going through this, items are used for invoicing. Applies for most of you guys, I hope, especially if you're using something like an application for payment. And as we move on from there, it's just alerting me that I need to use the same types as we move forward, which is smart. And of course, then we've got all the different income accounts and verify all the details and everything like that. Now, again, the beauty of the initial setup is, from here, I have now chosen exactly how I want ConstructionSuite to do all of my QuickBooks data entry for me. And that's really what we're doing. So with ConstructionSuite and QuickBooks, we've always tried to make sure that whatever time you spend putting together a good, nice estimate like this we try to make sure that you only have to do that once. So you invest the time the one time, get what you need out of the application, and then we push it to everything else that it applies to. This will happen for ConstructionSuite. If you guys needed to take an estimate and push it over to QuickBooks, we'll create the QuickBooks estimate for you. We'll create a QuickBooks invoice. We'll create purchase orders, change orders, credit memos, whatever you may need. We'll also turn around and pull the results back from QuickBooks as well. So you've got options here for creating a QuickBooks or importing QuickBooks actuals, which would be the bills, the checks, the credit card charges, payroll. There's even a report that we can run with this. We'll import committed costs, which would be all the purchase orders in QuickBooks, the invoiced amounts as well, so that you can see how much you've charged your customers. All of this is going to be available within the ConstructionSuite application. And for those of you using the corporate or Catalyst versions of ConstructionSuite and above, you'll also have the ability to collect together all of your QuickBooks estimates and invoices and generate the AIA G702 and G703 application for payment forms. Now again, the QuickBooks integration as a whole, I believe, is available in the Premier and Catalyst versions of ConstructionSuite and above. For the application for payment itself, it becomes available in Corporate and Catalyst. We see it much more frequently used on commercial projects than residential. On the residential projects, it tends to be on the large-scale residential projects. So we've made it available to anybody who would need to focus on those kind of projects and need these available too. So give us a call if you guys need that, and we can talk about some upgrade options to get it for you as well. Now in this case too, now that we've told ConstructionSuite how to load all the information into QuickBooks, we've got an option here under the export settings to export all the items that we would need. When these items are exported, of course, it's going to look almost exactly like it does here. To include any kind of numbering system that you guys might have wanted to create, we've got the same categories and subcategories. If you follow my recommendations, that's as deep as it needs to go. And when we go back and take a look at QuickBooks, you'll find in the items list in QuickBooks, everything will now be loaded for us exactly as we told it to. Now again, I'm looking at the top near the service items. Let's scroll down until we can find the non-inventory parts, and then you'll see where all of those have come into play. There they are. And so these non-inventory parts will match up to everything that I have in the ConstructionSuite estimate, and it creates everything that you guys would use in that estimate so that it's going to be available for us whenever we do push over estimates, invoices, purchase orders, or whatever it is that you guys need to work with. This, again, it just kind of preloads all this information so that as you're working your way through it, you can take advantage of the fact that ConstructionSuite will do all of your data entry for you in QuickBooks, or for those time and material jobs or the smaller projects that you guys might just need to jump into and do some billing or some job costing, you can plug it in directly here instead without having to necessarily go from ConstructionSuite to generate all your content. This is the best part about the QuickBooks integration for the desktop application. You've got the best of both worlds. If you guys need to go to ConstructionSuite to create your estimates and your invoices, then you can push it over to QuickBooks. If you guys want to go directly to QuickBooks, you can pull it all together here. You can import it back into ConstructionSuite to track. It all gives you this direct connection, this direct possibility, and it all communicates directly on the computer that you have these programs installed. So then the question comes up about ConstructionOnline. When ConstructionOnline comes into the picture, ConstructionOnline is a completely cloud-hosted program. And traditionally, cloud-hosted programs don't really talk back down to the desktop application. And this is really where we decided to bring Socket into the picture. Now again, Ben, our senior QuickBooks Pro advisor here, or senior QuickBooks developer rather, I'm the Pro advisor guy. The Socket application was released, what, 3 or 4 months ago at this point? Maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, something like that. Around 4 or 5 months, I think.
Okay. And what was that process like when you guys were designing Socket, when you guys were putting it together? What was your goal, to just exactly mirror the ConstructionSuite integration, or did you guys maybe change it around a little bit since it is all coming down from ConstructionOnline?
Well, it's a great question. It's more or less both, really. One of the big things that we wanted to do was make sure that you still had the same amount of power that the ConstructionSuite to QuickBooks integration already had. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose anything in that process. But at the same time, and again, it really, with your recommended settings, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. We just have to make sure that it worked with ConstructionOnline. And so we got to sit there and basically port over that same industry-leading QuickBooks integration and give our Construction Online users that same power.
Good, good. Yeah, and I'm glad you did as well, because it was and has always been one of the most highly sought after requests for any of the estimating tools that we have ever made available. QuickBooks integration has always been really, really high on that list of needs. With this too, as I mentioned, this is all coming from ConstructionOnline now, so Socket is going to be pulling down the information from there. So if we go into and take a look at some of the various different estimates that we have available, then we'll be able to take a look at some of the information that ConstructionOnline will push down into QuickBooks Desktop through Socket. Now for this process, I'm going to take a look at Lot 187 Baldwin Park, which should be pretty close to the same as Lot 185 was in ConstructionSuite. But you'll notice that we've got some, again, some big similarities here as we're working with this. Now, of course, this is part of the estimating features on ConstructionOnline. I'm also currently looking at the contract generation, and before we step into the QuickBooks Online settings, or the QBO settings, we're going to be diving into Socket as a way to kind of build up towards this QBO integration. So again, we're coming to the online to online. First, let's go online to desktop. Now again, with the estimates, we still have some similarities, like I said, categories like planning, and then the parts and pieces, the design services, the permits, the lot costs. These will all have their costs available to you here, and it's this information that's going to be traveling down through Socket to get into QuickBooks Desktop. Now Socket is this handy little application that you can install on the computer that you're going to be integrating with QuickBooks or with PlanSwift or any of our other desktop software partners. And with programs like QuickBooks, some of the options that you'll have available again would be the QuickBooks initial setup. You'll have the same sort of options to create estimates, invoices, purchase orders, change orders. You can even import the information back again so that once again you can see estimate versus actuals, estimate versus invoiced, and whatever it might be. Now of course this is all going to take place through Socket. And with QuickBooks open, your first step would still be to go through and take a look at the initial setup. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my recommendations tend to be the same, and they're always going to be available to you guys regardless of whether you're using a desktop version of QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online. The only difference might be here that with QuickBooks Online, we're going to call them products and services, I believe it is, instead of QuickBooks Desktop where they're all items. Same general concept, and as we're going through and taking a look at them, we'll go through and take a look at the QuickBooks Online options here in just a moment. Now, for Socket, since we're coming from ConstructionOnline and we're going to QuickBooks Desktop rather, the options here are going to still follow the same kind of path that we did with QuickBooks Desktop from ConstructionSuite. So you'll still see the options for the chart of accounts. I still make the recommendation that we're going to be creating a single account. Once again, there's a number of reasons why I make that recommendation. If you guys have questions about what to map it to, talk to your accountant. They'll point you in the right way, or in the right direction, rather. We've also got a parent item here for ConstructionOnline, and I'm going to change this ConstructionOnline parent item to be our online items. Let's spell it the same way. These ones are all going to be service items, and I do still use them for invoicing, because obviously for something like a schedule of values, we want to make sure that we're showing how much we estimated and how much we eventually invoice off of those as well. So they have to have a revenue account. And so you'll see the same set of options. This one is, of course, a little bit more streamlined. Same thought process with everything like this. So when you do make these changes and you click OK, then it becomes available for you to push all the detail over from there. Now again, we were just looking at Lot 187 Baldwin Park. So when we select that job here and it loads up all the information for ConstructionOnline, you'll still see the same sort of options available. Now with ConstructionOnline, you have the option of having multiple clients. So when you set up your project here, you will have to select a primary client. This is going to be the same for QuickBooks Online as well, which is going to be done directly through ConstructionOnline. We'll show you how to do that in a moment. You'll also have a project name. That's still going to be up here. So once again, we have this same kind of terminology exchange between the applications. We both have customers. We both have projects or jobs. So both of them are going to give you all of these options for pushing information back and forth, and it just ties them together well. Now on Socket, this tool that we have available to you guys here, you'll see that we've also given you a summary of the information and made it available to you here. This we had in mind because a lot of the customers that we're working with, or a lot of you guys, may have a bookkeeper that doesn't necessarily need to dive into Construction Online to find everything. They might just need a little bit of a summary of the information here. I know years ago when I was working with a couple of construction companies doing this sort of work as well, the QuickBooks portion, I used to get the spreadsheets and I used to have to navigate through all of those, and I would always ask the same kind of questions. How do I know my totals are right? If I'm plugging in all the right items, did I get the right costs? And is this the contract amount? Is this the actual contract amount? Because of course one of the things that might happen is you guys might go through and you might have some revisions and you might have a couple of different options. But in this case, we've highlighted all the important parts. We've also highlighted the information that we're importing back again. So as we're working between Construction Online and QuickBooks Desktop, you'll actually see a little recap of all the information that we have here. Now, of course, when you do go through and you push the estimate to QuickBooks, you'll still have the same style of options available to you here. You can push over the primary estimate for the job, or you can send over change orders if you have them. When you do send them, you can include the company overhead margin, which would be your profit margin, your overhead cost, and contingencies, all the standard things that you'll find in all of our pre-built estimate templates, or within any of, I think all of you guys have some form of O&P section in there, and this is typically where it would apply. You'll also have the option with the ConstructionOnline estimating, which is probably one of the most powerful online estimating tools available on the market today. But you'll have the option to do a different style of markup depending on what jobs they are. So you'll have the line item markups, you'll have company overhead margins, you could do different markups into the QuickBooks rates if you need them. You've got all these different options. So again, as you guys are working through this, you'll be able to select the ones that apply. I always keep my company overhead separated, and then it's just a click OK to be able to send it over to QuickBooks, and then it'll push all the detail over. Now, of course, the information is coming from Construction Online, so you'll still see the same kind of categories, subcategories, individual line items. All of this will be available. Within the QuickBooks application itself, you'll actually see most of this information showing up a little bit higher in the list. And of course, it's going through and building our job for us right now, but you'll see it showing up higher in the list where we've got the Construction Online items as service items. And again, same principle applies. We've put in all of our categories, and we've got all of our sections in Construction Online in the estimate, so these build into the process here too. So as you're going through this and you're working with all of these different items and the different fields and the different information that's going back and forth, you'll be able to take advantage of all of the detail that you guys have put onto Construction Online, which just kind of builds it all back down into QuickBooks Desktop. And in this case, you don't have to install much. There's just a simple little application with an interface that gives the bookkeeper everything they need in order to execute successfully through this process. Now, of course, this is still QuickBooks Desktop that we're talking about. And there has been an ongoing debate, I'll call it, between QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online for a long time. If you're working with a QuickBooks Online team, of course, they're going to say that QuickBooks Online is best. If you call or go into its website, they're going to be pushing QuickBooks Online. And so it's time that we go ahead and connect with and take advantage of the flexibility and convenience of working with an online system. Now, as I'm pulling up all this information again, Ben, we're looking at releasing the enhanced QuickBooks Online integration. What kind of time frame are we looking at for some of these features that we're about to dive into now for QuickBooks Online integration?
Well, that's a great question. The ones we're going into today, we are hoping to get out sometime, probably this quarter. It really is. We've taken advantage of the fact that QuickBooks has really been pushing into QuickBooks Online, like you were saying, giving us a lot more of that power and flexibility, and we want to get that out to our clients as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so hopefully, again, we'll have this in our hands really soon. But we're going to take a look at some of what it's going to be doing right now, just to give you guys an idea or a taste of what it's going to do. Now, for those of you who are already using Construction Online, you guys have seen that our QuickBooks Online integration is currently available. We're just expanding on the flexibility, or expanding on the capabilities, rather, of what we're going to be doing with this in the future. So currently, just like with QuickBooks Desktop, with QuickBooks Online, we're going to be sending over customers, we're going to be sending over jobs, we have the ability to create some invoices and things like that as well. We're expanding this to of course, include all the same features and functions that we've got in ConstructionSuite or in Socket going over to QuickBooks Desktop to make sure that we cover all of these requirements for job costing in construction. Now again, the last few times that we've gone to some of the QuickBooks conventions. I think Scaling New Heights was the last one that we went to. Not this past, but I think maybe the one before. And we've been to a few other conventions since then as well. There's always this concern that QuickBooks Online doesn't contain the features or the functions that we need for construction. Some of the reporting capabilities in QuickBooks Desktop is a little bit better. What I find are the most important aspects that QuickBooks Online might not provide by default. Well, we've got those covered in ConstructionOnline already. A lot of it is going to be available to you guys through the job costing view, where you can take a look at budget versus actuals, or you can even factor in committed costs. You've got the invoicing option. We've got all the different actions with the reports that are going to be available in here, so that you can generate a lot of these additional reports as well. So any of the concerns that you or your bookkeeper might have moving to QuickBooks Online, we can hopefully eliminate with some of the things that we're looking at now. So to begin with, of course, for those of you guys who are going to be working with QuickBooks Online in the future, the first thing that you'll want to do with ConstructionOnline to connect to QuickBooks Online is to go to your company settings, and from the company settings, you'll find an area on here for integrations. Now, of course, because we are integrating with another application, it is very important in this case to make sure that you're logged in as a ConstructionOnline administrator, because this is going to affect the company as a whole. Now, when you go to the integrations tab itself, let me pull that up for you guys now. You'll have all the different options and the different integration possibilities here to work with all the different cloud hosting file systems and calendars, and QuickBooks Online I've already connected to, or maybe Xero if you guys are using that one instead. From here you can turn on or off all these different integrations, and from here I've already got my QuickBooks Online account connected, and we've gone through the options for connecting and sharing the information that I choose. Again, it's going to be similar to how the QuickBooks desktop integration works for most of these applications. So we're going to see, as we're pushing this information over to QuickBooks Online, we're going to see a lot of the same kind of categories and subcategories. We'll be able to push over estimates and invoices, pull back actual costs from the bills and such. And all that information is going to be coming back as well. It starts, again, through the integration options available to you guys here as you guys are working your way through the QuickBooks Online account connection settings. So come here to the integration settings tab and make sure that you turn those on. If you guys are interested in taking a look at some of the other ones as well, we've recently done a webinar to cover these, so we can send you some of the details on those too if you guys are interested. We've already got a couple of questions coming through about Google Calendar actually. But in this case we're focusing on QuickBooks Online, so let's dive into how this looks on an estimate. So again, from here, let's dive back into the estimating page to go in from there. Actually, Ben's over here kind of flagging me to go to projects first, because we were talking about this earlier. With QuickBooks Online, of course, QuickBooks Online, just like QuickBooks Desktop, requires a primary contact. Is that right?
Yes, that is the case. Just like with QuickBooks Desktop, because of the way that the customers and the sub-customers work with with QuickBooks Online, you do have to go into your project on ConstructionOnline and set which one of your clients will be that primary client, so you can build the client sub-client list in QuickBooks Online.
Yeah, and so of course in this case, one of the first areas that we need to go to then is to go to the project and make sure that we have a client set for the project. From there, you'll want to go into, again, select the right project, go to Manage Project Team, and from here, turn on the QuickBooks Online connection, and make sure under your ClientLink users that you have selected which is going to be your primary QuickBooks customer for the job. Now again, with ConstructionOnline and these ClientLink portals, there's a strong possibility, or I certainly hope that you guys are going through and you're sharing this information with entire families and maybe some of their extended families. You might have like a customer representative here in ClientLink who's got a portal access to one of the jobs that you guys are working with. So hopefully we're sharing a lot of information with a number of different people. You still have to pick one. QuickBooks Online requires one primary customer, so you pick your customer here. Once this is finished, go ahead and save the changes. As we're going through that process and following these prompts, again, we'll step back into the estimate for the job, and this is once again where we'll find all of the additional options for working with the estimates and sending the information over to QuickBooks Online in this case. Now, at the moment, we've got the QuickBooks Online options in the right sidebar. You'll notice that we've got like the little estimate summary, we've got the estimate mode. Most of the work that I'm doing today is probably going to happen in contract generation, although you'll see the import results again showing up under job costing, where you may be working on either your budget to see estimate versus actuals, or estimate versus committed, or committed versus actuals, or one of the various different options available to you guys there. Or maybe we're going to be working with the customer on the invoicing page, where you can see the total price for each of the areas, how much they've currently paid, and how much they have remaining in this area. So again, we've got estimate versus invoiced, we've got estimate versus actuals, or estimate versus committed, or committed versus actuals. All of this is going to be available in job costing after we send the job over to QuickBooks and start putting together some of the bills from there. Now again, in this case, one of the earliest options that you guys would have will be to send details over to QuickBooks Online. Now again, this is going from online to online, so most of the connection is just going to happen in the background. When we go through and we select the options in here, it's not going to prompt, it's just going to go ahead and take care of everything. When you guys go into and log into QuickBooks Online, you'll see the results there. But as you're going through and you're pushing the information, you'll be able to choose a lot of the same style of options. So when we're sending the estimate over to QuickBooks Online, again, you want to make sure that you include any line item markups, because if you've got the line item markups affecting the contract price for your customer, make sure it shows up in the contract estimate that we're sending over to QBO. Same thing holds true for the company overhead margin. If we're including the company overhead margin, best to go ahead and check the box here to include it as well. If you've prorated the overhead margin when you generated the proposal for the customer, it may be a good idea to go ahead and prorate it when you're going over to QuickBooks Online as well. In QuickBooks Online, we're going to be using some invoicing options that are going to show up in QBO. And if we're going to be sending the customer anything directly from QBO, we want to make sure that the numbers match up between online and the proposal that we sent. Of course, you'll also be able to separate it out as individual line items as well, and you can send it from there. Once it gets to QuickBooks Online, of course, I think Ben has set up a QuickBooks Online company for us here. You'll actually be able to go into and see the results of some of the jobs that we've got under the estimates. Now, of course, in QuickBooks Online, there's a couple of differences, again, on what we're working with between ConstructionOnline and ConstructionSuite. You'll see some similar options or some similar differences between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. Again, the online is designed to be a little bit more web-friendly, and so they've moved things around to make them a little bit easier to find the details. So one of the things that you'll find, for example, is when you log into your QuickBooks Online account, over on the left-hand side, you'll find a dashboard which just shows you all of the important information coming up. You'll find the banking system, which is typically where you're going to find some of your accounts. Sales would be what in QuickBooks Desktop they would call the customer center. So this is going to be all the estimates and the invoices and payments that we've received. Expenses, that's going to be closer to the vendor center, where you'll see all the bills and the purchase orders and checks that you've written. Employees, that's pretty much the same. Reports, again, straightforward. But on the sales page, you'll be able to see all sales. These are the transactions. You can switch over to customers. This is where you're going to see all of the customer jobs that you've got. So if you guys wanted to go to the customer view instead, you certainly can. And from the products and services tab, this is effectively the what in QuickBooks Desktop we would call the items list. So as we switch over to the products and services, you'll start to see here where we have a little bit of the similarities again between Construction Online and the QuickBooks products and services lists, where they have, again, categories like appliances, and then the items would be appliance labor or appliances. In Construction Online, oh, I just opened up QuickBooks again. So let me move out of this for a moment, and let's see if we can scroll down to the appliances section. Oh, wait, did I scroll by it? Oh, I might not have it on this job. That's a good point, Ben. We pushed over a few already. So as we're going through and taking a look at this one, instead, let's go look for something that we see in here. So planning. So if we go switch back over to products and services, we'll scroll down the list to where we would find the planning section listed alphabetically. Have a lot of items in here and a lot of categories. There's planning. So planning would have all of these different items in there, like design services, like permits, like lot costs. These are all the items that we could be billing, and they all show up under the planning category in QuickBooks Online, and they were generated from our ConstructionOnline estimate just by pushing them over from there. Now again, the question comes up in almost every one of my sessions, and I know Ben was looking through some of the default options in there as well. If you guys are looking for recommendations for estimate options, the number one thing that I would recommend if you guys are going to be working between ConstructionOnline and QuickBooks Online, or ConstructionOnline, QuickBooks Desktop, or ConstructionSuite, our desktop application in QuickBooks Desktop, I recommend providing a numbering system to at least your categories that you're working with in ConstructionSuite or ConstructionOnline. And that way you can avoid what myself and Ben just ran into of having to scroll down to find it alphabetically in the list. If you guys were to enter in a 2-digit numbering system or use something like the CSI numbering system, I know Judith Miller from Remodeler's Advantage used to recommend similar things. You put these items in there and you work with those as well, and the numbering system will just guarantee, or it will make sure, that the items and the categories in QuickBooks Online always follow the same order as hopefully your estimate template does in ConstructionOnline. So again, quick little plug on that one too. I know Ben was kind of lightly involved in this process as well, although we do have a team of online developers working on these. The templating process in ConstructionOnline has been expanded pretty significantly as well. Remind me, Ben, that the templates can include what? Estimate templates, schedule templates, projects, I think. We also have, I believe we also have a few other options in there for, well, actually, there's a great deal of things. I mean, it can be just about everything that we've got in there. He's pointing at folders and things now, too. So we've got folders, we've got punch lists, we've got, you can even set up your subcontractor team. To the best of my knowledge, everything that you would need in the template can be provided as part of a project template. And this way, you can ensure that you guys always have the right set of information going over from an estimate in ConstructionOnline to QuickBooks Online. And so if you guys have any interest in seeing that as well, I think we've got some documentation. Sydney Dorsey is actually one of our lead ConstructionOnline trainers and loyalty specialists as well. She works with a lot of our companies in onboarding, and she's heading the team that manages that. I know she's got some documentation that she's put together and some recommendations. I'm not going to tell you specifically what they are because she's probably changed them on me now. But if you guys do have any interest, we can gather that information up from her as well, and we can provide it should you guys like to see any of the details there. Now, of course, this all kind of goes back to the estimating side. So if we go into the estimate itself and we open up to send an estimate over, again, it will remember all of these settings. And so when you do check the options to provide all of the detail, if you guys did want your company overhead margin to show up, for example, as a separate line item, it'll remember that this is your default set of settings for the company, so you don't have to check the box every time. So when you do send the estimate over, of course, it's going to take care of this in the background. It'll be building this transaction in QuickBooks Online. When it comes time to put in the next couple of sections as well, you can always send over a new version of the estimate if you need to. I recommend sending it once and making a few adjustments using the job cost budget to make some what we refer to as adjustments to those costs. This will impact things like purchase orders that go over after the fact. So in ConstructionOnline, when you actually take a look at the budgeting view, or the budget view under job costing, there's an area in here where you can apply adjustments. This is perfect for things like buyout that you're working with. If you find a subcontractor who will provide the work on this section for cheaper than you thought it was going to cost, you could come in, you could apply an adjustment. The new projected cost, or the adjusted cost, is what we're going to be performing our estimate versus actuals on. And so in this case, if we were to send over a purchase order, of course, first assign a resource in ConstructionOnline, but then when you push this purchase order over to QuickBooks Online, you'll have the options to do it here, choosing the vendor from the QuickBooks Online vendor list, or your ConstructionOnline vendors. Now I'm starting to get a little mixed up. But when you go through and you select the vendor that we're going to be pushing over to QuickBooks Online as part of the purchase order, it'll send it over for this job, it'll build the purchase order, and that would of course show up under the expenses area, which is where you'll find all the purchase orders, the bills, and everything like that. Now, of course, for the invoicing, once again, most of this is going to be found under the invoicing tab. This is where you can see your contract price, plus any linked change orders to give you a new total price. The total price is going to be what's going to be showing up in QuickBooks Online when you're pushing over your invoices. So again, if we come back into, once again, the QuickBooks settings here, you can choose what's going to go into that invoice when we push it over to QuickBooks Online. You'll be able to pick and choose individual sections, and this is to supplement the online integration options, the online invoicing sets. So of course from here you can choose whatever you'd like to include on the invoice itself. When those invoices do get created in QuickBooks Online, you'll be able to import that information back, either for the actual costs, which again are all the bills and checks and things. You can import invoiced amounts, and if you just wanted to track what's left for them to pay, you can import just unpaid values. And when you import just unpaid values, then you can provide this for your customer to show them exactly what's left in those invoices to cover. You can also import those committed costs from QuickBooks Online. Again, this is purchase orders. QuickBooks has always considered any kind of contract or work order or purchase order or anything that you have between you and any of the vendors to be considered a purchase order. And they also consider these committed costs as well. So all the open PO reports that you might generate in QuickBooks Online can be imported back in here as well. You can just import those committed costs here and it'll populate those columns for you. Now again, all this information that we're looking at is going to be exchanged in the background between our ConstructionOnline application in your account here and the QuickBooks Online application as well. One of the additional options that I've seen shown up, or the additional requests that I've seen shown up probably 1,000 times, is the ability for our employees to go through and maybe handle some of this information for us. Now, of course, in this case, I don't want just anybody coming into and clicking the options to send things over to QuickBooks Online. So this is going to be, in the very least, restricted based on who has access to the estimate. Now, obviously, because of where it is, if the user cannot see the estimate, let's just say in this case for my company, I have Ben as one of my employees, and Ben may not be able to see the estimate itself. Ben, in this case, they would not have the ability to push over anything to QuickBooks Online. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. And we definitely want to make sure that only your employees who have been authorized to make decisions like changing those the adjustment costs, things like that, they're going to be the same people who are able to push over and receive back that QuickBooks information, so you don't end up with somebody coming in and accidentally overriding values or deciding something's going to happen in a permanent way a little too soon.
Yeah. So again, as you guys are building up to or preparing for the release of some of these additional QuickBooks Online features, make sure that that's part of the consideration for who's going to be included in this process. We always want to make sure that we have the right team members focused on the right parts of the Construction Online application, and that we don't necessarily try to push everybody into every piece. I find that that's a little bit of a hindrance at times. My guys do best, or they focus best, when they only have a handful of things that they need to consider as they're working their way through the jobs. So again, if you guys are looking to include somebody with the QuickBooks Online integration possibilities, they will need to have at least some degree of access to the estimate for Construction Online. From there, you'll be able to give them the additional options for sending purchase orders over to QuickBooks, or maybe if they work on the sales side, maybe they can start the invoicing process, and that way your bookkeepers, who are going to be working with QuickBooks Online a little bit more heavily than some of the other team members, will be given everything that they need directly in QuickBooks, just like, where did we put the sales? Just like the estimate that we pushed over earlier. So all of this information is going to become available to the bookkeeper as needed. From there, they'll be able to do whatever work it is that they need to do in QuickBooks Online. They can create invoices from the estimates that you've pushed over, or they can take a look at the estimates that are in there. They can switch back over to the customer view so that they can see every transaction associated with the customers. They can report off of all of this information, and they'll have all of the flexibility that we've always provided with QuickBooks Desktop, except now it's all going to be on the go. So if your construction team is based out of somebody that I was working with today, their company is based out of Perth in Australia. His bookkeeper's working in New Zealand. So obviously they're not going to be in the same location, so they've got to be able to share this information. This is perfect. We've got other companies who work in, we've got one company that works in Canada, in Toronto, and they build hotels all around the world, in fact. So of course the people doing the projects are going to be all over the place. They might be in the Middle East one day, and they might have another project that's going on in maybe Japan at some point or something like that. So they're all feeding the information in. The bookkeeper's still going to be sitting at home handling everything right here. So again, this cloud-based flexibility, this connection option that you guys have really enables your team to get out there and get the job done without necessarily anchoring them to the office or without requiring that they fill out a lot of paperwork or anything like that. So you're really enabling your team to succeed regardless of where they are. Now, of course, in this case, we still do have the requirement that you'll have to be connected to the internet. Unless, of course, you download some of these files and work on them from home. For those of you guys who haven't seen it yet, ConstructionOnline does provide some amazing options for downloading things like estimates that you guys can then make a few changes to. The only time that I've had that affect me recently, I think, was when I was flying to one of our client locations for some on-site training. Unfortunately, they haven't figured out how to get good, effective internet on planes yet. Once they do that, I think we'll be open to do it wherever we need to. Now, of course, with that, this is going to cover almost everything that we have available for you guys for our 3 scoops of QuickBooks. Again, the 3 major options that we have are ConstructionSuite to QuickBooks Desktop, ConstructionOnline to QuickBooks Desktop through Socket, which also works with PlanSwift and a few of our other desktop partners. And now we're going to be opening up ConstructionOnline to QuickBooks Online. I think then the only one that we will have left in this is going to be the next project, or one of the next projects that we're working on, which would be QuickBooks Desktop might be working with QuickBooks Online here in the, no, ConstructionSuite, which is our desktop, will be working with QuickBooks Online. So that's going to be one of the next projects that I believe we have slated. Don't have any projections for that yet, but hopefully we can have that one available for you soon too. We do need to know about interest though. So of course, if you guys have additional questions, it looks like Holly's been doing a great job trying to keep up with most of these things. But if you guys have additional questions, go ahead and send it over to us. If you guys have any interest in seeing some of the additional details, by the way, by all means, let us know. And for everything else, if you guys need to reach out to us for anything, by all means, give us a call at 1-800-700-8321. Or you can always reach out to our company directly via email. There's a number of different email options, and you'll always be able to find them in ConstructionSuite or ConstructionOnline. Just take a look for the contact screens, and you'll be able to get to us from there. For everything else, though, again, my name is Ian Schaefer. I'm one of the Senior QuickBooks Pro Advisor. Again, thank you, Ben, for joining us today. Ben Willis, he's one of our senior developers here working with QuickBooks. And Holly on man in the keyboard over there handling the questions. For now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. There's still several questions that I'll be taking care of afterwards, and if you guys have more questions, by all means, chat them in. For those of you who are pretty confident in what you guys have seen, or you're pretty happy with the direction that we're going, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again real soon, but until then, thank you again for your attendance. Thank you for your time, guys, and hopefully we'll talk to you next time. So take care, and have a great night.